Okay, sorry about that. We'll go ahead and start the Board of Finance meeting for 16th of March. Present are Gary Nino, Mike Anderson, Carl Johnson, Dan Smith, myself, Paul Simons, Sarah Nelson, Amy Friend, and Winona Burdine. First order of business is public comments. I'm not seeing any in the room. Or online. Okay, item number 3 is review of previous minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes. One from November 17th and one from the 9th of March. Has everybody had an opportunity to review those minutes? Great. I'm sorry, was that the bundle? There's 2 sets, the March 9th and 17th November. Okay, that's fine. So we have a first and a second for the minutes of the 17th. All in favor of accepting those minutes as written, say aye. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. 17th November approved. 6-0-0. Next set are from March 9th. That's a first. Second, Gary, thank you. All in favor of accepting the minutes from March 9th as written, say aye. Aye. I count 6-0-0. Thank you for that. I think that makes us current for minutes. Wonderful. Okay, we're moving right along. So the reason we're here tonight, to start our initial discussions about the proposed budgets we've been presented with and where to go from here. So I'd like to try to just ground first, maybe from my own head. I'm going to ask Christine to help me with this. So the spreadsheet that I requested that you sent out shows a shortfall of 212,000 or something.
213,307.
Okay, thank you. And that represents primarily what we spent last year, 194,000. There's a little bit of change. Some numbers I try to calculate for new revenues for this year. 767,000. Does that seem about right?
So it's a $743,683.83 difference current year to projected for next year.
Okay. Thank you for that. And do you have a total for the proposed new expenditures from both Board of Selectmen, operating and capital, and Board of Education, that total?
The total increase or the total?
Total increase.
Mike is correct.
Okay, I had 763. Very good. All right. So new revenues are 20 grand short of proposed new spend, which is the delta between 194 and the 213. Just want to get everybody grounded in that area. Okay. So I think for those of us that have been on the board, the goal this year, we knew we were going to have a bit of a hill to climb to close that $194,000 budget gap. So I want to throw out there initially to say that we're not going to levy new taxes to close that gap. We are going to take it out of these new increased revenues, which would leave us some 500,000. You got that number too, Mike?
I don't have that. 762, 992, 213.
Right. I didn't do the math. I was waiting for the number. Oh, sorry.
I'm confused. Why are we subtracting it from the total increase? You want to say, you want to keep the total increase? We want to, I mean, all we're saying is we want to bring the total increase down 200 and X thousand dollars.
Right. And from there, I'm going to say that we have then $520,000 that we can afford to spend on new expenditures versus the
62.
762 is being requested. That's all. That's all. Just sort of back into that. So, sorry. 549. So just want to get everybody's thoughts on that. I mean, the new spend that's being asked by our boards is, 740 something $1,000, $760,000. If we want to close the budget gap, the overspend from last year, that leaves a total of 549-ish that we can then say is available.
I just want to make sure we copy. So right now, the revenue is up 743,684. The revenue increase is 743,684.
Oh, sorry.
Again, the revenue increase is 743,684. You gotta take the 213,307 out of that. I think it took it out of the budget increase. So Christine, do you have your calculator up there? So 743,684 minus 213,307. 533,077. Okay. So then you take 762,992 and you minus 533,077. And that's what the Board of Education and the board or the Board of Selectmen have to lose from their budgets.
They have to reduce their increases by that amount.
It's basically 213, right?
So it is that right now, to use the old mill rate number with the current grand list, we would need to either come up with $213,307 in extra revenue or cut that in expenditures. So any way you back into it, that's the number.
Exactly.
So you can close your mic, Mike. So I wasn't done. So that would be the first bit. I'd also like to see if we can't get the taxpayers realizing some kind of a reduced tax burden. So I also like to see if we can ground on possibly lowering the mill rate a bit and not only satisfy last year's overspend, give some modest increase to operational and capital budgets while still giving a little bit of tax relief to folks out there that are spending $5 a gallon for fuel oil and everything else, and terrific inflation pressures. What that number is, I'm hoping we can come to some kind of agreement on that tonight. It will mean, some reductions to everyone's increases. No one's going to get a cut. They're just going to get not the increase. If my proposal flies, they're not going to get the increase they want, but the taxpayers get some relief. I think it's important for us to put that on the table. And what that is, I don't know. I mean, I had a $500,000 on my mind, which is equal to like $300,000 more. Significant. But if we can bracket it between that $500,000 reduction in taxes and simply closing the budget gap for the overspend last year, I think in that middle, that white space we have, that's where we got to find some agreement. Thoughts?
I just want to point out that 2 years ago, we gave the taxpayers relief by using the undesignated fund to the tune of $400,000 or change. Last year, we cut that relief in half because we know we have to close this budget gap and gave another $194,000 of tax relief to the taxpayers. In closing this gap it's still part of the tax relief, that they benefited, we all benefited from for 2 years now. So I want that to be in the mindset as we go forward, if we present this, that we're just putting back into the budget what, benefits that they've gotten for the last 2 years. So, yes, it's time to pay Peter and Paul back. I'm not saying I'm not with you, Paul. I'm just saying the relief of putting this money back is from the revenues is what we have to do responsibly, and I agree with you. Whether or not the selectmen and the Board of Education can come up with more cuts than that without affecting capital that we've historically robbed them of, and the instructional supplies, the minuscule amount that Board of Education has in discretionary funds, while we have the money and these are like one-time asks perhaps, that we can use some of that extra revenue for those things when it's really needed. So that's just where I'm coming from. I don't, this 213,307, we're not raising taxes. We're not going to raise the mill rate on people as far, that's my opinion. Whether or not we can lower it, that's to be seen still.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else? Anything to share on the thoughts on the table here tonight? Not sure if Winona has a question online. I'm sorry if I'm missing you, Winona.
Nothing here, thank you.
Okay, great. So, Christine, I guess since there's not a lot of questions, if we were to our 28.6 mill rate, if that was 28.2, what would that impact be for reduction of increases?
Okay, so for the mill rate to be 28.2, we would have to reduce the budget by $448,809. 448,809.
So that would be from the $763,000.
Oh, for people that can't see me, I just nodded. Yes, sorry. I'll use words.
So that would leave, check my math as I did it with the pencil, leaves about $315,000 available for budget increases. Lowering taxes and closing the budget gap from previous years.
314,183.
Thank you.
That's basically an extra $335,500 on top of the 213.
Yeah, no, it's luckily we have the wonderful news of a lot of increased revenue this year. So lucky for us, we're able to even have this discussion because we have these extra dollars. But these extra dollars are taxes to people. People are paying more with taxes anyway, right? Whether it's used car values, home prices, whatever it is, they have that increased value asset, but they're paying more. So people are realizing tax increases regardless.
Yeah, I agree with that, but we are paying a lot of taxes in North Stonington. I don't disagree with that, but we also expect to see services for our taxes. So we have to make sure that we're not being penny wise, pound foolish, and undercutting the services to the town at the same time. We got scolded pretty hard by a Board of Selectmen for cutting out capital last year, and the fact that we had folks on the road in a truck that was unsafe. And those are things that happen when we continuously cut. So we have to, there's a balancing act there.
To be fair, we didn't know how bad that truck was when we cut that truck out. We didn't. If we,
I remember I remember the narrative that came after, but I remember the presentation and we saw pictures of rusted, rusted out stuff. So I don't like,
But I think what you're saying is true. We don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face. We are still talking about, again, this is just one proposal. We're still talking about $300,000 in increased spending, and to be divided across two boards. It's modest. We'll decide here tonight, hopefully, if it's too modest. That's my proposal. So if we think that is not palatable to the 6 voting members here tonight, then I'd love to hear something different. Go ahead, Mike.
I just want to point out that according to Daryl's presentation back on January 19th, and Christine, you can correct me if I'm wrong on numbers, we had a 4.78% increase in revenue. And without motor vehicles, that increase would have been 2.2%. So doing the math, 2.58% of this increase is due to increased taxes on people's vehicles. Okay. Others is whether it be businesses that have come in, businesses that have improved themselves, or other measures. The stuff that, not that I want to, tax business, but if it's new business and we're getting new revenue from it, I mean, that's our dream, right? And I don't think we should be afraid to use new revenue to help ourselves out. I just want to know what those numbers are, Christine. So maybe we can think about what is 2.58% increase. What is that out of that 743,684? What does that equal in numbers? If you know what I mean. Daryl said the increase was 4.78%. So 4.78% equals 743,684 ostensibly, correct? So what is, I guess it's probably a little more than half of that then is new taxes. Would I be right in that? If the total number is 4.78% and half of that, 2.2% is other business, other revenue, and 2.58% is attributable to motor vehicle tax increase. How does that, Gary, can you get that?
No, I'm not following, but I have a total increase of 4.5%. 0.3 came from real estate, 22.4 came from personal property, 21.2 came from motor vehicles. Those were the net changes for each line.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps you. I'm not sure where you're at.
Well, I'm talking about as far as this, the 743,684 is the extra revenue that we have as it applies to this budget process.
Yeah, I had about 700,000 for the flat note.
Right.
For Daryl's presentation.
Exactly.
But
So let's say the 21.2% of that.
So the other thing you have to think about, yes, it's a 14 million increase in motor vehicles, but that's not just on existing motor vehicles. We had a whole lot more new vehicles that were purchased in town when we did the supplement on motor vehicles this year.
Okay.
I want to say it was something astronomical, like 300 more than we normally have. So people have bought more cars. I don't know how, since there are less cars available, but people have bought more cars. So it's not just it's not just taxing on the cars that people have had for the last 5 years. People have consciously made the decision to go and buy a new car or get another car because there's another person in the family that needs a car for whatever reason. So some of it is actual new vehicles that, well, new to people. They might not be a new car per se, but a new acquisition to the household. So they knew when they acquired that it was going to have some sort of a tax on it.
Right, so part of that, it's only part of the tax that is extra. So if you take that whole amount that we got for cars, there's a certain percentage of that is extra because the car prices are up. Not the whole thing, I think.
Right.
Is that all
I-
right,
I'm saying,
okay.
I'm saying that, but I want to frame it to, I'll take this one.
Yeah.
I just want to frame the conversation to be, I'm not here to say, hey, we got a whole new pile of money, let's use it as a revenue stream. I don't want that to be the case. And I don't think anybody on this board is going to take it that way. I just want it to be put out there. Not all of this increase is based upon car taxes going up. And to Christine's point, which is a very valid point that we have to talk about, is that people bought new cars and a huge amount of money out of this money is from people having more value in their parking lot, in their driveway. Which in our world goes to property taxes, and it's, that's a choice. So it's not that we're strangling people who are, it's all of their, all the new increase in taxes because they're just because of the economy. It's, there are some in there because of personal choices. So when it comes down to moving the town forward and maintaining a solid fiscal profile, there's got to be checks and balances, and I don't know if I'm willing to listen to you, Paul, but
Right.
where's that extra $300,000 out of those budgets? Where's it coming from?
Right. That's the conversation. We have to go back to those boards. Those boards have to go back and do some digging, right? So I picked this half of a mil because it was around half of our windfall. But that was a reasonable place to go to try to get some tax relief while still giving some modest increases in operating budgets. It was arbitrary. Now, if we want to dig into the math, again, the higher math I'm doing with my pencil, I forgot my calculator. We can probably do some of that, but that was the number I was looking at to try to give everybody a little bit of relief. And that's all there is. And then we're the Board of Finance. So this might sound cold or callous. I think we should consider this more transactionally. Our job is the purse strings of the town. We have to listen to what those impacts will be against those boards. But right now, I don't think we're there yet. We're just trying to find out what can we stomach to spend. May not be what I suggested.
Well, and I don't think transactional always means less, right? Because there's gonna be people who call in and say, why are you cutting my services, right? So we have to be, I'm fine being transactional, we just have to be balanced with it.
I agree totally. I mean, services won't be cut, right? There'll just be less of an increase. So I think cutting is the wrong term. Instead of spending 763,000 in new spending, it'll be half that, as an example. I mean, maybe it's going to be a quarter of that. I don't know. What it's gonna be.
And I totally appreciate the framing, Paul, I totally get it. But the reality is that costs go up. And so if costs go up, then services either cost budget goes up or services get cut. Like, I totally appreciate the way you're saying it.
Can you just round about again for me? If the amount of money we're gonna try and ask the two boards to cut, our money we were trying to pay back, which I'm just gaining knowledge on, how much, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if we're gonna ask the two boards to cut a little bit, should we be willing to take the money that we want to replace into the designated fund and are willing to chop a little bit off that for next year?
Can I just explain for a second? So you're not trying to put money back into the general fund. What you guys are trying to do last year to balance the budget, you took revenue from, you took money from the undesignated fund, the 193,999. So right now, when you are just making sure you have a balanced budget, you have to take that into consideration because that's how you balanced the budget last year. So in order to have a balanced budget at the current mill rate, that's why it's the 213,307, because we had some new revenue, but not enough to balance out that 193,999. So that's why it's that much more
Okay.
to balance the budget.
Thank you.
So think of it like, we have. Think of it, here's the ground right here. That was where we had the budget last year.
Yep.
All right, we had enough revenue to be here, all right? To fill it, we had to get
Took that in, okay.
213. So this year, if the budget's still at the same level, we still say have the same hole. So you're taking that 743,000 we have, putting it back into that hole. If you want it, if you want to balance it, now you got to take 213 of that right off the top.
Yeah.
And now you have 530,377 to play with.
And we all were well aware of that last year. We knew we didn't balance our budget. We had to take from the piggy bank to make sure everybody got what we needed, what we thought they needed to get. So that's all that was.
And to keep the mill and to actually lower the mill rate.
That's right. So we had to cut more, or I forget last year what we did was there were still some increases, but we could have cut more of those increases back, or we borrowed from our savings account. I think last year we all were pretty adamant that that wasn't going to happen again. We thought maybe it was going to be an increase in taxes, but luckily we have this wonderful increase in revenues. That's going to close that simply. All I'm suggesting is, can we go a little bit further, because we have this $750,000 in increased revenue to give the people of North Stonington a little bit of relief. I don't know where that's going to land here. I just wanted to throw it out there.
I also just want to review history. So the mill rate in FY 20 was 29.0, and FY 21 was 29.5. And in FY 22, which we are currently in, it's 28.6. So it's lower than the mill rate for both of those years.
Thank you for that. And Mike, have been talking, who else? Dan, what do you have to share with us tonight? Anything? So where can we go? So we can, I don't think a motion is in order, but I think we need to find some ground. So the $500,000 decrease, asking the boards to then go back and remove whatever that number is going to be from their budgets. How palatable was that to this board?
I think it's too much.
I'd like to know what it looks like before we say it's too much. I mean, where would the cut be made? And that's not ours to make.
I do have one idea, and I'll pitch it out to all of you guys. Whatever gross payment we have, that we're gonna say, hey, this is what we can allow, $500,000, whatever that money is gonna be. We don't ear tag it, Board of Selectmen, you get this much, Board of Ed, you get this much, and kind of divvy it up. I'd say we just say, hey, this is the chunk of money. We give it out to those guys and let the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen prioritize. They know their business better than we do. Let them, I wouldn't say fight over it, but it's money, it's revenue, it's to support their budgets, and let them determine how they need to run the town on the Board of Education side and on the general government side. Let them have, meetings together and everything, and maybe that will facilitate shared services a little bit more and kind of get the ball rolling on that stream. Maybe they can come to some ground, cut some stuff that they can kind of combine. But they should be the ones that, if we give them a chunk of money, which 500,000 or whatever, this is what we're allowing you guys to go up. Let them have at it.
So that's an interesting thought. So you're thinking, we say you can't have 760, it's going to be 360 or 460.
And let the board of selectmen and the board of ed come together and say, hey, we got this pile of money. How do we want to spend it? Between those two boards, it really, we've done this in the past where we've sent down edicts and everything saying, you can't go over this percentage and you can't go over this percentage, or you guys stay flat and everything. This is a little bit of a different out of the box thought I had that, hey, go craft your budgets, go make it work.
Interesting thought. I think we still have to figure out what that number might be, but so Christine and maybe even Bob will ask it. That's not a concept, or Sean too. It's not a concept we've done. We kind of said, BOE, you have this, or selectmen, you have that. I don't know if we've ever done that, but it's an interesting thought.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
It's a complete out of the box thing, but
Right.
they're the two boards that know their budget's the best.
I would just say, why would we not do that? Like, what's the reason not to give them control over their money?
All
So-
I'll say is that they are two separate independent boards. They do not have shared line items. They don't have shared budgets. So as the Board of Finance, they're separate groupings that you are supposed to give direction to. You're almost, rather than trying to have them collaborate, you're actually pitting them against each other by doing it that way. You should, in my opinion, you should give them individual guidance so that they know how to run with it. You have an 8-person board for Board of Ed and a 3-person board for Board of Selectmen. So trying to coordinate a meeting with 11 people plus support staff in a week so that they can turn this around back to you for next Wednesday, I don't know.
We might not need that extra week. We could give them an extra week and say, hey, you have 2 weeks. And we've had tri-board meetings before. Why, I don't understand why this is
So-
such a roadblock.
If you don't like it in 2 weeks, our back is against the wall at that point to call for the budget hearing.
We might get a better product.
If we
That's right.
allocate the dollar amount to each board, then they wouldn't be pitted against each other.
But that's not what you're talking about. You're
No,
talking
no,
about-
I'm talking
I
about,
think he was.
I know, I'm talking
No.
about if we say, hey, the increase, allowable increase is $500,000, hypothetical.
Mhm.
We say $500,000. Board of Selectmen, Board of Ed, you guys work amongst each other to prioritize your budgets and everything to use that money. I don't understand why this is an outside of realm of why can't we do this?
Before you
Maybe
jump
it's
in,
because we
Bob.
just never done it.
So Dan, how do we weigh the value of a truck versus school goods like paper, pencils, pens? I mean, how do you weigh the apples and oranges?
So I appreciate what you said, Christine, about their two different boards. They serve one entity, the town. And if these two boards that spend $21 million a year can't get together and figure out how collectively they're going to reduce 300,000 or whatever the number is, shame on the boards.
Well, Gary, I have to disagree with you because if you look at the state in general, in all states, the Board of Ed controls itself. The Board of Ed, even though they're part of our budget,
I'm not saying control. I'm saying they serve the town.
they do serve the town, but it's a separate entity. The Board of Selectmen has no power with the Board of Ed and vice versa. It's just like we have no power with the Board of Finance. We listen to what you want to do as far as the budget goes, but I think coming from the private sector, it's different in the public sector. And if you look through the entire state, boards of ed and boards of selectmen don't get together to work on budgets. It just doesn't happen.
So let's do it.
So why don't,
Just because it's never been done.
now, why
doesn't
don't
mean
you
we
just,
should-
why don't you give us a number, the Board of Selectmen a number, and give the Board of Ed a number? We'll do the best we can on the number you give us.
And that's certainly been
Just a couple of
We've
things
always
you need to, just since I have the microphone for a second, I just kind of
I
took
see
it
you,
over.
Christine Wagner.
A couple of things to remember is, so both the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen are in contract years with unions, right? The people that we're having discussions with, negotiations with, are paying $5 a gallon for gas too. And they're seeing the same inflation at Stop and Shop that we're seeing as taxpayers. They're taxpayers. But
Not necessarily in North Stonington, though, right?
not sorry, but a lot of them are. So but they still have bills. So when they come to the bargaining table, they go,
we're paying $5 a gallon for gas, we're paying $5 for heating oil, and we're paying more Stop and Shop. And it's the same arguments that the taxpayer has. So it's something we're up against. And the second thing is, I know you don't want to cut capital, but when I look at the increase in the government operating budget is 146,344, and the increase in capital is 261,902. That's the increase. Where do you think we're going to go first to cut? Because that's where we have to go, because there's not enough an increase across the board. We're doing union contract negotiation. That's the first place we're going to go. And I mean, I already talked to Christina after this meeting was over. When we talk tomorrow, and next Tuesday at the Board of Selectmen meeting, that's where I'm going first, because it's the biggest numbers. Taking 2,000 out of this and 3,000 out of that, we can't get to the number you want us to get to. But if I take 100,000 out of 50,000 out, I can. Where do I find that? I find it in capital.
Yeah, no, it's going to be tough decisions you're going to have to make. There's no doubt about that. I mean, hopefully it's not capital as much as it's been in the past. Maybe it's other areas, and I think there are.
But it will be capital, and then next year you'll
That's
have the
gonna be up to
same thing as you always cut capital. That's what you're gonna
We're not
do.
going to cut capital. You're going to cut capital.
But the other thing is, this budget includes $85,000 for the expenses in this building that we've tried to put in for the last 2 years, and we've had to cut out to try to balance the budget. So that 146 that Bob's talking about, 85,000 of that is one line item for utilities for this building. Christine should be other
Yeah,
Christine.
that's
Wait, can we just
yeah,
before we
just-
bring Christine in,
Right.
just, my concern is that it would, so if we had talked about this a couple months ago and been able to have this conversation a few months ago, I think it would have been a very interesting debate to have. My concern is it's going to look like the Board of Finance is abdicating their role of managing the budgets for the town and putting that back on the Board of Finance. But if we're gonna be forcing them to, for all intents and purposes, sort it out, then, I mean, sure, it makes our job easier, but I don't know that it's necessarily. We can give direction on the budget.
I yield to Christine Wagner. She's been sitting there waiting patiently.
Do you think she's gonna be nicer to you than me?
Thank you. I just have to share a little bit of frustration. I'm hearing things like, we're looking for a better product. I've had no questions on the budget that we presented last week, not one. Not an email, not a verbal, not a phone call. I don't know what's missing there. I also have never had any questions on our current financials. I don't know when you guys review them. We send them. If you see where we were at the end of December and spent any time going through that, you would see our shortage in special education. You would see in our budget, we have zero money for instructional supplies. If you recall and review what we proposed in our budget last year, we reallocated a lot of money that was needed in our budget and was explained it needs to come back at some point. We need instructional supply. If you look at this budget that we are proposing, I welcome questions. I haven't had one. A bulk of what we are proposing is special education that was shorted last year. And by the grace of health insurance savings, we're able to cover it. And if you look at the rest, it's instructional supply and some computers. There's nothing else in there. So I'm not sure what better product we're looking for here. But I'm a little disappointed to think that there's the thought that this is a fat budget and that there's a place to cut, that we're just not doing it. So I'll let you guys continue to do your work. As far as pitting us against the Board of Selectmen, that's exactly what you're doing. And we have always worked very well together. And I find it really disheartening to think that that's what we're going to have to do, is sit and grovel for money between the two boards. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, so what we're talking about is initial conversations tonight. So we've heard the presentations, what's been requested. I thought there was some opportunity for this board to give some taxpayer relief and still offer some, I'll call it again, modest increases to budgets. We're going to continue to talk about that. I'm not sure that it's a bad product that you put out there. I don't think that it is. I think it is a lot of hard work for both these budgets. But there's taxpayers that we have to also be aware of, right? Go ahead, Mike.
I'm just trying to figure out, so we're talking about if you're at your 28.2 mil, 448,809, going on your, hey, let's throw it at the two boards and make them divvy it up. Say they split it in half. So that's 224,406 apiece that they have to reduce their budgets. You look at the Board of Education budget on page 6. And they talked about it last week. The amount that, the 2.48% seems like a big number, but it's 354,746, right? So you take out that 224,406 and it's 130,341.50. That's a big bite. What?
No, it's definitely a big bite, and I'll say it like it is.
You can speak up. Just so you know, although alternates have just as much voice on this board, other than they can't vote, but they have the absolute ability to sway opinion and to say their piece.
I just see it as a Board of Education budget. There's no way they can really do it.
Can reduce it by that much?
Correct.
So there is one other piece, right? The $290,000 war chest that the Board of Education still has for use for educational purposes. Now, that may be earmarked for the things at this point, but I think that should be at least part of the conversation.
I wouldn't call it that, though.
Can the superintendent speak? Is there an opportunity?
Sorry, Peter, I didn't see you there.
Okay,
Right
so,
ahead.
so did you include in your increased revenue, $205,000 for the 18 students right now who are coming from both Preston and Volantown?
That's all
That
big in
says-
the 15 million that you get.
No,
Yeah.
no, Peter, we only included the 8 students because the ones that pay in arrears aren't included, so it's
Yeah.
the. 10
Well,
it's the
Well,
students.
I won't be here to see you enjoy those funds coming here because I'm retiring. And believe me, I could walk away from this and say the heck with it, but I can't. Because even when I didn't have a budget here, my first year, when it was Natalie's budget, I cut $388,000 out in the first 3 weeks. But the bottom line is the reason why we have kids coming here is because we produce a good product, not a good product, an excellent product. And I look at this and say, we're already helping you out with the special ed funds on this. And we're in a situation right now, which, by the way, given tax rate release, look at the page, I think it's the last page of the budget that Christine put together. And look at the zeros and the 0.15%, which was a van that the town bought for us. We've done that over the years. And again, I get it. Things are difficult. It's difficult for everybody. But, in the same token, we've done everything we possibly can. And I get it. The town had a tough year this year and they ran. What was the deficit for the town this year? Can I hear that number was? Someone have that?
To balance the budget, it was 193,999.
Okay, so I've been here 10 years and Christine said this last week, except for the last couple of years, every February, I freeze the budget to make sure that we get to the end of the year when we didn't have situations with COVID and we didn't have big surpluses at the end of the year to make sure we get to the bottom line. So the Board of Education is really picking up a lot of the slack for some things that did not go right. I get that. But in the same token, we're producing an excellent product and the proof is going to be in the pudding. In terms of the fact that if we go at this rate, you're probably going to have 35, 40, 45 students in the next 3 or 4 years coming from other districts. That's an investment for you guys. Don't sell this budget short. That's all I have to say.
No, thank you, Peter. I mean, the town made a $40 million investment, right? So we understand this is a great product out there. So you can thank the town's people for that as well. Sean, why not? Go right ahead.
Talking as a town treasurer, of course.
I just want to, I think the idea of asking the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education to work together to come down is not the way to go. I think that's a cop-out for the Board of Finance. You've heard the Board of Selectmen budget, you've heard the Board of Education budget. If your goal is to reduce, then I feel you need to, you've heard what's in their budget, question items. Ask the selectmen or, give them some guidance to leave here by, but it shouldn't be work together. This is now the Board of Finance budget. And I would agree with the Board of Education budget. Once you take out the increases for special education, I know it's like a 1.3% increase in their budget, which is less than their labor increase. And one question, I didn't bring the copy of my budget with me today, but is there revenue in the budget for the Board of Education use of this building?
We can't use it as revenue because it's a town department that's paying it. So we split the invoices with them. So they pay a percentage of the invoices, which is part of why that's at that 85,000 instead of 100,000.
So it's accounted for in that 85.
It's offset and it's in the Board of Ed's budget to pay that portion.
And another consideration is there's been a lot of talk about leasing out the second story wing of this building and how certain that the probability, that happening is. We have the expenses in there. Any thought of including the revenue for that? Thank you.
I mean, me for one, I hate to count chickens before they're hatched, right? So if it was real and there's checks being presented to Christine, I think we do at it. But I think there are good things on the horizon that we all have faith, right? So that we hope that those are going to happen. But until they do, I think it's wrong, in my opinion, to put something in there that's not a dream, but it's not come to fruition yet. Go ahead, Mike.
This is kind of a logistical question. The Preston students that pay in arrears, when does that check happen? June?
Deb, can you answer that one?
Hi, yes, those funds would be realized in November the following year. The agreement is that we would bill based on October 1 attendance.
Okay, so there's no way we can realize the Preston funds before the fiscal year ends.
No,
No.
Okay.
not based on our agreement with them.
What are we getting in this fiscal year?
We already got the check for this year. It was the 57,165. So I think that was forced. Deb?
Okay, that was from
Five.
Preston, and we got that.
No, that wasn't Preston. That was Voluntown.
Okay, but
That's
Valentine.
five students attending Voluntown. And next year's number, we're supposed to have 10 from Voluntown, as far as I'm understanding. So the number of the amount of revenue should actually be 115,000 for Voluntown, and then the other students would be the Preston ones that would pay. It would be due October, invoiced October, payable in November.
Of 2022 or 2023?
Yeah, so we get the payment. So this year we had 5 students from Voluntown who are here currently. So we got the check for the 57,165. They're projecting 10 Voluntown students for next year. So that's why we have it at 114,330. And then the students from Preston that come next year, we won't receive that check until November of 2023. So
Okay.
it's too late to be realized in the fiscal year 23 revenues.
Gotcha.
But we realized the 115.
Correct.
With the Preston students being in arrears, we're still likely gonna have 10 students again the next year. So it will actually, so we are expecting to realize $160,000-$70,000 for the, over 200 for the 20, yeah.
That's not
For
counting
next-
any,
next-
there
next
could be
budget
more
cycle.
Volantown kids in that 23, 24 year too. So the point being is like, if these guys need instructional materials now to make sure that we keep making a quality product, you know, it's not like they're not bringing revenue into the town at a pretty amazing clip.
So again, this equals 0.5% of their operating budget or something. I mean, it's great to have these revenue coming in, but to think that's not already in the $14.7 million they're getting, it's a little disingenuous, right? So I think it's kind of baked into the cake that money's, we're giving them a lot of money. The townspeople are giving them a lot of money to operate the Board of Education. It's great that we have another 100,000, 200,000 in subsequent years, but they're getting it, right? It's baked into the cake of the 70% of where the town's total budget revenues are going to the Board of Education. It's great. I hope they get 100 students in, but I don't know how that, where we top out.
Well, not if we don't fund the budget so that they can buy supplies.
Do you think that's really true though? When we have
Yes.
$290,000 in the savings account that we're not going to buy
I
pencils?
I
don't
have
believe that for a
been in
minute.
I had a conversation in this room with the previous principal. And I was doing some grant fundraising with her and she was near tears because she had her entire science budget completely zeroed out, like science supplies, no science supplies that year or the elementary school kids. So I do believe that's true. I have kids in school. I know what they get. And I know what I, as a private citizen, do to try to offset that.
Do you believe that's before the non-lapsing account or after? Exactly.
I
So
can't-
I mean, there's another input there that I think we all aren't really appreciating.
I think that's a budget question to Christine's point. Like, we haven't asked her a single question. Are they planning on,
That was there for us. We saw that.
right, but if we cut your budget, if you have to cut your supplies, are you gonna take that out of the non-lapsing account? Like, doesn't have to be a theoretical debate item. We can ask that question.
No, it's the numbers there, right? That's why I was going to this transactional approach. If she can spend the money on instructional supplies, I think that's been asked and answered. The answer is yes. Right? Unless Christine is she can say that she,
I heard what I needed to hear. The town treasurer says it's our budget now. Let's do it.
I think since we asked Christine, we'll do it right after she speaks.
Okay.
Go ahead, Christine.
Thank you.
Wagner, sorry.
I guess my question is, at what point, so the non-lapsing account, we were, because of COVID, able to put some money in there, and we've been really due diligence with that about using that for one-time expenses. Instructional supply are operational. And at what point are we going to actually put instructional supply back in our budget? I guess I'm confused by that. I'm wondering, right now, it looks like we're in a really good spot in this town. So we're not coming to you and saying we need to raise the mill rate by 3 mills to cover our budget, things like that. This would be the time to start putting back in operations of our school. Instructional supply is operational. It isn't a one-time thing. It isn't to pad our budget. It's how we run the school. We've cut it out and found it in different places year after year. It's a little disheartening to think that, again, that you want to use a non-lapsing account, which was set up for unexpected expenses, capital expenses that we can't put in the budget, things that we might need down the road. And now we want to use it to supplant the budget. I have a kind of an issue with that, if that's what you guys want to keep doing, but at some point you got to put instructional supply back in the budget.
No, I think what you're suggesting is what we've been doing with our undesignated fund. We overspend or spend beyond our means, and we then have to borrow. So I'm hearing you. I'm just trying to find what that number is. Sorry, Gary, did we cut you off before? Go ahead, Mike.
I have to agree with Christine on this RISA account. We gave them this account 2 years ago. We gave them the authority. They know exactly how much can go into it every year. And it can go in every year. It's not a cap on it. And they have discretion as to what to use it. If you want to take it out, if you want to rip the discretion away, take the RISA account away, that's another debate. And we'll have a debate about it. But, for us to say, now we're going to dictate their use of it, I just think it's BS. We gave it to them for a reason, for emergencies. So they didn't have to buy at a fire sale or buy at a higher rate, because when they could get it the following fall, after the fiscal year is over, at a lot bigger discount. That's what it's there for. So I'm not into, using that, holding that over their head, unless, if there's a vast amount in there and they're asking for some type of capital expenditure in the budget, we can certainly say no to that. That's what it's there for. But, it's not there to hold over their head, as far as I'm concerned.
Go ahead, Gary.
So I appreciate everything you said, but that's the taxpayers' money. So at the end of the year, if it wasn't spent, it's left over from the previous year, it goes into this account. I think it's disingenuous to have an entity hold taxpayer money to use at their discretion when they feel appropriate. And then at a time like this, when it may or may not be required, I haven't really gotten to that point yet, not touch that money, but ask for an increase. I think we need to look at this wisely. Now, this is my first time through this process, but several times through this process, I've heard that's our money. That's not from any of the people applying for money in this town. No one should say, that's our money, you're not allowed to use it or look at it. So we heard it from a couple of the boards. Phrases like, we're helping you out. We're all working for the town. You're not helping us out. You're helping the town out. This whole feedback tonight is very disappointing.
So Gary, I don't think that the RISA account is that much different than the undesignated account we hold municipally. And so we have our undesignated account for the municipal town side of the town. If a bridge goes out during a hurricane or whatever, we can, and rightly so, the RISA account for education is much smaller. They don't need $3 million, but I also don't think what they put in there is unnecessarily low. I've joined a number of the Board of Ed meetings during COVID. They had to use that RISA money to buy, things to separate the students in kindergarten. There were things that were not planned on had we not put that RISA account in place. And I'm using the royal we because I wasn't on the board at the time. Then they wouldn't have necessarily even been able to do that, which is important. And who knows what could happen. Cyber is so bad right now, so bad. And they could be dealing with network, IT security upgrades that they're going to need that they haven't, we just don't know. So I don't think it's unreasonable for them to have a certain amount of money that they keep for emergency situations.
Go ahead, Mike. And
I'm
Nicole,
just- I'm
I
going
do
on-
see you out there. Oh, please.
I'm following up with Sarah. It's this last year and the year before, the townspeople passed the budget and they passed an education budget. All that money's earmarked for education. All that, and if the Board of Education happens to have some freak thing happen like COVID, where they save hundreds of thousands of dollars on buses and are able to leave that money in a fund that's only designated for education. It's not their money. It's it's for the kids, right? It's not Bob's money. It's not Christine's money. It's the kids' money. It's in a fund. It can only be used for education. And it's there for emergency situations where they can actually keep operating fiscally with at least some type of savings account, where you can take some, money when you run short on cash or whatever. So it's not I know it's the taxpayers' money, but the taxpayers already made the decision to give them the money. And it's just happened to be good fiscal management that, or luck, that the money's still there. And we gave them the opportunity to have that account to run in a responsible manner. And I just don't think we can second guess now on the fact that they have it.
I agree with everything you said, except they approved the money to be used for education. And a year like this year, why wouldn't we use the money for education? Well, why would we give them the money for education? Already agreed, I get it, it's taxpayer money. And then abdicate the ability to say when that money's used.
I agree with this budget's for next year. We're not talking about this year. You know what I mean? So you don't know what's going to happen between now and the end of this fiscal year. And we're talking about educational supplies for next year. So. I mean, that's the main part. Talking about.
I was under the impression we're not allowed to do line items.
We're not.
Okay.
We're just saying, we're talking about, it could be any
Yeah.
discretionary item. There's
Okay.
contractual and there's discretionary. We can only talk about discretionary.
Okay.
And that's just the thing I'm using on the top of my head because
That's what it says.
Christine was talking about.
All right, so there's a few things that look like one-time items that I don't know if could be in there or not. I'm misunderstanding 111 or 111,185 for network IT. And I understand moving everything is quite expensive, but wouldn't half of that be a one-time expense? One of the other things was replacement of equipment.
If you give me the page number, I can answer your question as you ask.
That was page 9.
That was page 9. Total expenses, network IT,
110.
110.
Okay. So let me just find my detail on it.
And
And
only-
Deb, if you're on and want to answer, part of it is we have a one-to-one Chromebook program. So that's going to be some of it for replacement equipment. We do that each year. We have to buy new Chromebooks for
That's in-
the freshmen.
So it's included there, but it's also included over here. Okay. So replacement of equipment of $40,000. That number on page 7 is added into line 110, 110. on
And
page-
Deb, are you on? If you could answer that question on the IT? I don't know if she's still on. Just bear with us a
I am
second.
still on, yes, I am. You may find more detail on what that includes in the capital improvement page for technology. I don't have the budget you're looking at. I'm actually looking, but if you go toward the back of your booklet to the detail, 25,000 for 50 Chromebooks is included in that number. That is actually an ongoing expenditure year over year to replace Chromebooks after the first 3 years, because Chromebooks, once the 4th year rolls around, they can no longer push out updates to them. So the program has where the student comes in as a freshman, they utilize that Chromebook until their senior year. So each year thereafter, when a new incoming freshman class comes in, we're using the actual projected number of students to project what that replacement cost would be. Next year's incoming freshman class would be 50 students. They would get a new Chromebook at that point. It would stay with them for the 4 years. So although it appears as a one-time purchase, this is a purchase that is actually becoming part of the operational budget, as in all schools, because we have to be in a position where we are able to educate in a hybrid situation. So the students are currently using those on a day-to-day basis as part of their curriculum. The other piece, there's 11,000 that is up further on the top section. Where are you on the capital improvement page? I'm not sure if everybody got there. But you'll see that we have some network hardware. And as Sarah was mentioning earlier, continually upgrading the fiber and making sure that we have the hardware in place, and the UPS systems is 2,900 of it. So those collectively are part of that total 110 that you were referring to, I think it's Gary. I'm not sure if that helps understand where some of that number comes from.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
And
very
page 33 has a detail on that as well. So there's detail for each of these line items within the budget as well. Gary, did you have another question?
No, it was
No.
Carl, and I'm all set. Thank
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, Carl. It's hard to see from here.
Thank you, Christine. I would
Yeah.
like to get in Selectman Porter. She still has her hand up. She does.
Hi, Paul. Yes, thank you so much. Just a very quick couple of comments. One, I want us to remember, as many of us have sat through town meetings when we've had to go back to the taxpayer because capital has been cut and we've had to ask for additional appropriations, and how vocal taxpayers have been about not liking that process. So they want it in the budget. Of course, I understand how hard it is for us in the past years to pass a budget on the first go round, but I do want us to remember how vocal they've been about not liking the approving additional appropriations throughout the year outside the budget. I also want us to remember there's lots of talk about all of the prices of gas and Stop and Shop and oil, and how we're all feeling that. I want us to remember that the budgets you're holding us to, those budgets are having to see those increases also. So you're asking us to cut a budget that and not give us the money to pay for those additional expenses that everybody else in the country is realizing. And then what I would love to see, and this is the tough work, guys. This is everybody has put so much time and effort of their own time volunteering to put these budgets together for you guys to review them. What I'd love to see is for you guys to go line by line in both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed budgets, outside of contractual requirements, obviously. Take a look, as Christine said, at the financials, see what the actuals are looking like, and guide us on where you think we've gone up too much or could cut. That would actually be helpful for us so that we can all be on the same page. Thank you. And again, I cannot thank you enough for the efforts. This is incredibly tough work for all three boards. And I just want to thank everybody for all of their time and effort.
Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate that. And it is tough work, and looks like we have a lot more to go. So I'll go back again. I mean, there's going to be some tough decisions if taxpayer relief is something that this board is interested in. I know for one vote, I would not support anything that doesn't have some kind of taxpayer relief in the form of a reduced mill rate. Now, what that is, I think there's still lots of space between what I suggested and where we'll be at the end.
What would be the number if you went to 28.4 instead of 28.2? That's kind of chopping your feet up from underneath you, but it's just a short.
So that would be that we would need to reduce the expenses by $331,058. So 331,058. That was 28.4.
So let's kind of move on from that. So if that, for example, was the number, I don't hear a lot of support for asking the Board of Education and Board of Selectmen to sort this out themselves. What kind of a, division of those dollars would be appropriate? Since the Board of Education is 70% or ish, whatever it is, of the total budget, is that the right split? Or do we got to look at it more, where are the needs greatest? Again, we don't have a real number yet, but it's just, that's something we're going to have to give guidance to once we get grounded on a value. Any early thoughts on that, or is it really going to be depending on how much money is available to you? To them? Go ahead, Mike.
I still, Christine, is there any way you can let us know what the percentage of discretionary budget is in the Board of Selectmen budget and how much is in the Board of Education budget? I mean, non-contractual.
No, we don't have the budget broken down like that. No.
Because we were just talking about that last week about, breaking up as to who has, what percentage they have to take off.
One of the items that I mentioned was the 85,000 for the expenses in this building. That's not contractual per se, but it's not discretionary and it wasn't in the budget. So that's one of those things that it would fall in a gray category if you were looking at that. With the new software next year, we'll be able to do that because you separate out wages and operations.
I mean, I think Selectman Carlson was pretty clear where the cuts will have to come from. And I think it's fiscally irresponsible to not put in the expenses I do not want to go through another budget cycle with not having the expenses for this building accounted for personally. So.
So Christine and Deb, just so I'm clear on this, I'm looking at the financial statement, which I did print out both of them. It looks like your expected balance, if you're projecting out, would be minus 274,509 for this year. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, because we're short on special education.
Okay. And you said you're already covering that. How? With the recycle
Well,
account?
it's going to depend on this budget a little bit, but we're hoping to cover it with the savings in health insurance.
Okay. So I just want the board, again, to be aware that they are already. It's not like they're rolling in money.
Savings and insurance. It's just like the increase in taxes. It's some good things that have been happening to help us close these gaps for sure.
It's not due to an increase that we have that money.
I'm sorry, Peter. I'm sorry.
It's
Peter.
not due to an, sorry.
Could you hold on, please? Could you hold on, please, sir? Winona, please go right ahead.
Could you please clarify for me if the mill rate stayed at 28.6, where we are with the two budgets that have been asked the way they currently stand?
Yeah, so if the mill rate was 28.6 right now, we would need to cut 213,307 to balance.
Thank you.
Peter, there's a slow time here. We're happy to let you in.
All right, so there was no increase to our healthcare last year. It was zero. If I'm mistaken. It was done because of the fact we've spent the last 9 years, Deb and I, working with 6 other districts to develop a consortium. And as a result of that, after going through a couple of tough years, we're doing very, very well. And also we have wellness programs that have also been helpful to us for our teachers and staff. This is not because we raised it 8%. I have to tell you, for 26 years of developing budgets, I've never seen a time where a superintendent and a board of education would ever say, let's raise healthcare so that we can have a surplus in that account so we can pay our bills. It's just ludicrous to think that way. Again, this was the result of the fact that we got together. When I got to North Stonington, a family plan was almost $32,000 for health insurance for a family plan. Right now, 10 years later, it's 26,000. It was actually 18,000 at one time. But again, this is because we got together with 6 other school districts and towns and developed our own purchasing of health insurance. And this, and going to a high deductible plan as well. And that's what it's from. It's not because we, again, I have to say it. I don't know if every year everybody looks at it, whether it's what the healthcare is going to be. And you don't raise healthcare, so you're going to have a surplus. It's just not the way it works. Thank you for your time.
No, you're welcome. And I agree. That should not be the way it works, but thank you for that. No, I don't think so either, but
No one thought that, Peter, just so you know. I think it was just that Christine said that you're going to be able to cover it only because we lucked out and had better healthcare for all your efforts.
But I think the comment that was made was, well, like everything else, it goes up and we have to charge more, something to that effect. And again, I just want to make it clear that that's not the case.
thank you again. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. So again, now looking at the government's profit, well, I hate that word because it's not profit. The in revenue and expenses report. This is just year-to-date fiscal date. You're not projecting out for a loss like the Board of Education did on their, for theirs, right?
QuickBooks
So
doesn't do that, and included in our profit and loss is the Board of Ed because they are a line item for the town. So you would have to see if what we have in ours matches up to where they are in theirs, because they're B32 in our overall.
okay.
So
Because
it's not- it's not separated
you're at
out.
minus 356 right now. We're not projecting a hole at the end of the year, are we?
No, we're not projecting a hole right now, but it has to do with how much has been spent out and how much
Sure.
revenue we've brought in at that
At
time.
that time.
And at that time, we hadn't gotten all of the second installment tax payments.
Another reason why it's so important to get the tax bills out on time. Just throwing a plug in. Well, could I suggest, I think I don't think it's clear like who on the board is comfortable with like a cut beyond the 213,000 versus who would be comfortable with it. Could we do a poll so we can see how far apart we are?
I think that's reasonable. So how would we do that? So we got to pick a number. I can say that I wouldn't be comfortable with just paying for the hole we made last year, but so let's go with my suggestion, since that seems to be the far end. So $500,000 decrease, Christine, in taxes.
Now, you did say 28.2, which is 0.4.
I did say that, and I can't change that. So
28.2.
Yeah, that's right. 0.4 is what I meant to say. Which is what number for reduction in spending?
448,809.
448,809, yes.
So 448,809. 809 from the proposed 763-ish requested increase in spend. Which leaves a grand total of some of the calculator.
Let me calculate that.
Thank you.
So you're not making a motion, right?
No,
You're
no,
just
no,
doing a
just
straw
a
poll.
straw poll.
Straw poll.
I thought that was a great suggestion. Forgot we could do that.
Well, you did it once and I really,
I
like,
did?
one of our previous
Oh,
meetings and it worked
great.
really well, so.
Okay, let's see how it goes this time.
That leaves $614,183 in total, in like if you're taking it from the total increase. Yeah, they'd have to cut 314,183,
314,000.
both boards between them.
I don't think that's. It doesn't sound right.
So right now, the two proposed budgets are 762,992. If you want to reduce the mill rate by, hold on. If you want to reduce the mill rate to 28.2, you need to cut 448,809. That leaves
312-ish.
So it would be an overall increase increase between all the parties of 314,183.
But really, they're cutting 448,000.
Yes,
From the requested increase of 760, yes.
Right, right.
So let's take that straw poll. So if we're offering up increases across two boards of 314,000, who would be comfortable with that? I, for one, would, since it was my suggestion. Gary, is that,
I want to see the math behind it because neither board is willing to offer anything. And you got to give me some time to go through it line by line and make my cuts and come back and say what I think is right, but I can't do it right now. I honestly believe the budget holder should make this decision. But because neither budget holder wants to, we're going to have to go through with our pen and pencil and decide what's right.
But we,
so as boards, they cannot, the two chairs of the boards can't throw things out right now to say, we would cut this, we would cut that. They have to meet with their boards with whatever guidance.
I get it, Christine.
I'm
but
just
I heard-
explaining
I
the
heard
process for
ve-
you and
I got
everyone
it.
else online.
I got it. But it was very clear.
We can't go
While you
line-
didn't-
We can't go line by line with Board of Education. But
While you didn't say no, I heard a pretty strong no.
So
Wow.
you heard that, you're,
So we have
Yeah.
bottom line.
you have to.
we have bottom line discretion on the Board of Ed. Now, if they wanted 350 and we say it's going to be 200, that's where we can have impact. Now, where they decide to reduce those increases, those are the terms I want to use, that's kind of up to them, right?
Yep.
Go ahead, Bob.
Paul, that statement was made, it was actually a misspeak on that. It's a new board member and they weren't aware of, it's the first time they've gone to the budget. They weren't aware that we don't ask you for line by line cuts or suggestions. We'd rather do that on our own. We wanted you to give us a number, give Board of Ed a number, and we'll work it out ourselves. Thanks.
So I guess for this poll, I mean, we have to, unless we're saying there's not enough information in front of us to make a decision about where we want this budget to be, maybe we need to step back and go through these budgets again. I mean, I don't know. I've kind of looked at them. I spent some time on them myself. Again, more transactionally, as cold as that sounds, I was looking for taxpayer relief, some increases in buffering budget, and closing the overspend of last year. That's kind of where I am with that.
I think your approach from a top down is correct. I don't necessarily agree with your numbers, but I don't have an interest in sitting and deleting line items. I've read the budget. I agree with the majority of the things that are asked for. I do believe we should look to reduce it more, because if we could get 1 year where people were flat, I think everybody would feel like that was a tax cut, because they've only ever gone up since I've moved here anyway. So I think I'd be interested in looking somewhere between what was presented as a budget and a reduction of the 213. I'm not interested in going beyond that, but I agree with your approach, which is we should be looking at this top down, not bottom up.
This poll is not going well.
I'm
That's right.
really comfortable with taking down the 213,307.
As am I.
Who else is?
You said you're comfortable.
I'm comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with that as well.
I'm comfortable moving to the 28.6 as well.
Yeah, so I am not because it's not any taxpayer relief. So that's really what I was hoping to get out of tonight's conversation. So to me, it's still an increase in taxes. Nothing substantial for the taxpayer.
It's not a reduction. Both boards are gonna have to reduce, and and there's gonna be increases on the taxpayers. It's kind of like that all the way around. That's.
Yeah, no, those are the facts. So where are you sitting on this?
I'm between 28.4 and 28.6 at 28.5.
So beyond the whole filling of last year. Slightly.
So the math on 28.5 is $272,182.
272, what?
182, 272, 182.
Even though it's a small reduction, but if you're gonna reduce it, you have to, 0.1 is 0.1, no matter how it's still a reduction from what it is. And nobody's gonna like it. We're gonna send both boards back and they're gonna come back and say, this is too much, this is gonna be too much. It is what it is. You know, I'd like to see, I know probably in the PowerPoint slide, I can't pull it up on my stuff right now because it's in Excel. But the ERISA account really intrigues me. When Mike put it forward and I seconded it and everything, I thought it wasn't just for emergencies. It was to pre-buy. It was going to be an account that constantly moved. It was going to go up. It was going to go down depending on what they can buy, and if they can buy it better at this price and this price. It wasn't explicitly supposed to be used for emergency purposes, kind of like our rainy day fund. It was to be able to pre-buy stuff and everything. It wasn't, the way it was explained to me, it wasn't going to be an emergency account that break glass in case of emergency type thing.
Yeah, that was,
That's how it was explained to me. It was supposed to be a rolling capital account that they could constantly go in there, buy stuff at a better price and not have to have a fire buy at the end of the year.
That's true.
Well,
But Christine is saying that, you know, she wants instructional supplies to stop being a one-time buy capital thing and put it back into the operational account because
There's a lot
they
of
need.
there's a lot of stuff in this budget that is going to be bought every single year. Not a lot of one-time capital buys. Maybe I'm missing something, but it's a $2,000, $5,000 buy here and there for a server, and then I think in another couple of years they're talking about a tractor. Is that a one-time buy? But you know, I see an account going up into the 200,000 range. Maybe I'm missing something.
I think it was my comment about, I was debating Gary, where I referred to it as, you know, I don't think it's an unreasonable rainy day fund. I wasn't implying it was exclusively a rainy day fund, but I agree with your description of it.
But as soon as we label as rated, I've heard it slush fund, I've heard it, you know, a bunch of different, it should be, and how it was proposed to me, it's a rolling capital fund that they can use at any time to be able to buy things when they need them, not at the end of the year once they get the money.
So if we think that there are legitimately things within the budget that they can use the RISA account from, they're going to go do that when we give them the budget cut, right? That's what they're going to go do.
Can I finish this poll,
Yeah.
please?
Sorry.
It's okay. So, Amy, I'd like to hear from you too. This is an informal poll, not really a vote. Are you okay with just closing the budget shortfall of last year? Or is there something more that you think maybe we can do once your mic is on?
I'm having a really hard time with how we're gonna ask these boards to cut anything. I'm new to this. I'm just learning a lot of it, but numbers are numbers. You know, and a lot of the line items, if they say they need the money, we're trusting that they need the money. I, for one, don't want to see anyone's mill rate go up. I'm trying to grasp an understanding of that RISA account. Just because it's like, what exactly, I almost want to go back and listen to the meeting to see what it was decided for, because we're getting three different versions of where those funds are actually supposed to be allocated for. School supplies are paramount to teaching. I have a master's degree in education, and I mean, as a teacher, I spent a lot of my own money on school supplies, and I bet that most teachers are doing that right now out of their own pocket. So I don't feel right asking teachers to do that, because if you love teaching, you're going to spend the money to teach because you love teaching. I don't know, it's really hard. Yeah, I don't know that we can decrease the mill rate. I mean, that would be the ideal, that would be the perfect scenario, but I don't see where we're getting the money.
So you're okay with status quo, but closing the budget gap shortfall last year, which was.
Yeah, I mean, fiscally, that's what we need to do.
Yeah, this
But-
is not a rowboat. it's just
Yeah.
trying to get you one comfort level. What was that? Close the gap. Yeah, that's about.
No, not yet. When you first proposed, the first one sounds really good. I tried to work some numbers on the second one that I proposed. I really think them numbers are gonna be hard for them boards to drop without hurting everything. So I think I'm gonna have to stick with the, try and close the gap, try and stay where we're at. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. I can say right now, it's definitely leaning toward just the status quo, closing the overspend of last year and not providing any kind of taxpayer relief.
And if I can just reiterate what I said, because I don't want anything to be taken out of context as to how things can be misconstrued, and I don't think that it's right that teachers do take it out of their own income. So I don't think we can keep expecting them to do that like they have been. So the money needs to come from somewhere. Like, we're pulling new kids in from other towns saying that we have all this to give them. And, you know, like the Board of Ed, they've built up such a great school. Everybody has in our town, everybody who works there, all the families. We just need to come to some common ground to see that everybody is taken care of and not taken advantage of.
Well, just to
Go ahead, Mike.
piggyback on, my wife's a speech pathologist and she's spending money on supplies all the time.
That's
I won't say which school, but
terrible.
it's not this one, but it's true. They-
No, it's true.
they're-
I know it is.
It's a constant shortfall and teachers teach out of their heart and do what they have to do.
Gotcha.
So it's not really fair to them either. Did we hear from Winona about this?
We did. She was okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. Winona, it was, you're satisfied to keep the mill
2.5.
rate the same and just close the budget gap from last year.
That is correct. I was agreeable to try to get to the 28.6.
Great.
I do have a question for Christine. Can you repeat what the mill rates were the past 3 years, please?
So FY 20, it was 29.0, FY 21, 29.5, and FY 22, which we're currently in, 28.6.
Thank you.
And with the caveat being that there was a reevaluation in that year. So taxes went up, even though mill rate went down.
Correct.
Paul, the biggest
Please.
question, next question would be, how do we split the percentage of what you want to take for money amongst the boards?
That's a fine question. You know. Yeah, there's 200 and whatever it was, 13,000. Yeah, of monies that we, went overdrew our checkbook last year. Now it's time to, but again, we have 700 and something $1,000 in new income. I think we can do it. Now, if it's a 70-30 split, I don't know what that is. But it's something else. We'll do it if the straw poll is complete, but I guess it's close enough. There seems to be the majority of us are looking just to close last year's don't want to say bounce checks, but overdraw of our account. And then that's it.
I see that as a minimum acceptance criteria.
As
I'm hopeful we could get beyond that.
As do I. The straw poll that says otherwise, but again, we're not there yet, all right? Now, my fear is we're gonna say Board of Selectmen, Board of Education, we need 213,000, and we're not gonna get it. So that's gonna be the difficult place where then we gotta decide that there's gonna be more mandates out there.
Well, we're also gonna then hear from the public. So what typically happens in this scenario is we hear the cuts and then we hear from the folks who either agree with the cuts or are concerned about them, and we get more input, which is valuable for us.
So hearing that the 213 is where we seem to be from a common baseline, why wouldn't we make that ask? In parallel with reviewing it ourselves.
We absolutely can do that. Now, what I don't want to do is do the 213 and then ask, and then review it ourselves and say, I see 313 that we can do, and then go back and ask them again. We can, but it's just, it gets kind of awkward, you know?
Yeah, but so we tried a different approach and said, go see what you can do, and we got told no.
Right.
It's your board. It's a cop out to ask us to work together. It's our budget. So I don't have a problem doing that.
So could we say then that before we say anything, go ahead, Winona.
I'm gonna throw a left turn in here. So a month or so ago, when we got the presentation from the assessor's office, and he was going over all of the increases in revenue from the solar projects and motor vehicles and some of the other things, I had notes where he noted some potential lawsuits that could be coming for the town and some potential expenses associated with those that were not included in his report, from what I recall. And that concerned me a little bit, and we haven't had an update from him. So I guess I'm asking if potentially we could get an update from the assessor before our next meeting on where those potential lawsuits stand.
There's no update right now on any of those matters, and I don't know that there will be before the end of the fiscal year. Everything is ongoing, and we just kind of have to go with it as it happens.
Do you happen to recall the magnitude of some of those? I mean, we haven't discussed that component at all, and I don't know if Bob has more insight on that piece of it or not. But it seemed like there could be some costly expenses there that we just kind of washed over.
So he should not have commented on the ongoing litigation on one of the projects because it is ongoing. So really, I don't think that, no, Bob's sitting next to me shaking his head. No, we don't have any update on any of them at this time, and we can't comment.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Gary.
I just want to make sure I got these right. So at the current mill rate, we'd be looking for 213,307. At 28.4, we'd be looking for 331,058. At 28.2, you'd be at 448,809. And there's a 28.5, which is what?
272,182.
272,182. Okay, got it. Thanks.
We're getting close. So is it reasonable then to say that from our two boards that we're looking for at least a $213,000 cut? And from that, I don't have a number. Is it 70% from the Board of Ed and 30% from the Board of Selectmen?
I'm still at my my 28.5, because then you can just use round numbers of 150 from the Board of Selectmen and 120 from the Board of Ed. That gets you, ballpark at 275.
That wasn't consistent with the straw poll.
Well, you know what?
I'm trying to play by the rules here, although we're making them up as we go.
But that's kind of a split that I'm looking at. It's almost 50, like 65 and a half.
So let me ask this.
I agree with the 50-50 concept.
50-50.
Yeah.
Because they do not want to have the lump sum go out and let both boards, create their budgets and use the money that we're going to allow them to use and tailor it the way that they need to. And they want individual edicts saying, this is how much you need to cut. We're going to give it to them. That's,
So that.
I'd say I agree with Sarah, 50-50, right down the middle,
So what
whatever
is-
we do.
What exactly is that number?
So if it's for the 213,307, it's 106,654. It's really 106,653.50, but I'm rounding.
Round. Just round numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is it, can we say, I'm not sure how we give that guidance. Is it verbally here tonight with Ursula and Carlson here and?
You would make a motion to give the guidance and then you would deliver it as chair to those two
Gotcha.
in an email.
Any,
Christine Wagner does have a
Yeah,
handout,
no,
so
I
I
see
don't know
her.
if
We
you
would
want to
not
take
do
that.
this without hearing from her one more time.
One quick question.
Oh, go ahead.
If we do give them these amounts, say one comes in lower and the other one comes in higher or vice versa, are we stuck to, after we make a motion, that they have to stick to that? Or can we come back and,
I mean, my expectation would be, given the guidance, that's what we want. So if it comes in differently, but the amount is the same,
all right, what if the
I could
amount's
live-
not the same? I guess think that's my
then I
question.
don't think we have to meet again until the guidance has been
all right.
met, in my opinion. But
I would say it's within our remit as a board to discuss what they
right.
came back with.
again,
Whatever.
we're looking to close the gap. If we're not closing the gap, that's an absolute non-starter for me. Because that's,
But I would want to hear, I personally would want to hear what the cuts are, and I'd want to hear the public response to that.
and we certainly will. That's for sure.
Yes.
Christine, please go right ahead. Christine Wagner.
Sorry. Sorry, I don't mean to keep cutting in. I just want to make sure that Gary understands it's not that we won't do it and it's not that we don't want to work together. But we've been working on these budgets for about 4 or 5 months. So we've been working on it. And initially when we proposed last week, they were with cuts, they were with looking at every line item really deeply. And we brought forward our very best budget. So that's why where we are in the process right now is we're just looking to see if we have to cut something, we just kind of need that guidance from you guys. It's kind of a working together thing, not a we won't do it or we refuse to do it. And certainly, we're willing to talk to the selectmen and all of that. But when you just say, here's the number, go figure it out amongst yourselves, that becomes difficult. But I don't want you to think that we're unwilling to work together and do it. We are always thinking about the taxpayer dollar, in addition to always thinking about our students and our staff and supporting the very best school district that we can. So I just want to make sure it's clear that there was a lot of work that was done on this budget before bringing it forward to you. And we made some really hard decisions. Last year, if you recall from the budget, we took $83,000 out of the non-lapsing account. The only reason the non-lapsing account has the balance it does is because of COVID. It won't continue to be in that situation. If you see the list of purchases that we didn't put in the budget that are normally in the budget that need to be considered moving forward from the non-lapsing account, we're certainly happy to start putting those things back in the budget the way we used to, and then do year-end spend. But when we came out with moving forward the non-lapsing account, we didn't think that was a very fiscally responsible way to do things. And we wanted to have some really good deep thought about the purchase and the capital and the things that we need to do. We're currently working on non-lapsing account and what purchases we need to make out of there that we deliberately have not put into the budget. So I think if you look at the non-lapsing spend, you guys have reports of that and where we've spent that money. You have the list. Most recently, I think we approved spending. My most recent was February 3rd. You'll see things that we've had to purchase from that account. Many districts carry that balance in the millions. We don't think that would obviously be where we would want to be in North Stonington. But just to be clear, you know, if you guys want to go back to the way it was done in the past, we're happy to put those capital items all back into the budget. I just don't think that's the way we wanted to move forward, which is the why we did it the way we did it. And we're happy to work together. It's not that we're saying no and we won't do it. It's just that now we're looking for the guidance from you guys because we did put forward our very best budget. And I'm sorry, I will not interrupt again. Thank you.
Tell
It's good stuff.
Tell Pippin to quiet down.
That's right. Thank you, Christine. So sounds like there's overwhelming support for status quo, but closing the gap of last year, a 50-50 split. So I'd like to make a motion to ask the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education to each reduce their budgets by a minimum of $106,000. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mike. All in favor of this motion signify by please raising your hand. I have to count everybody here. Yay, yay, yay.
I don't count.
And it's 4-2. Good count. Yeah, I got you.
Where's the two? Even though you made the motion.
Yeah, because that's what the team wanted. I'm one person on the team.
I mean, that's awesome.
Okay, motion passes. I'll craft an electronic mail to Selectman Carlson and Chairwoman Wagner. Thank you for that. I don't think there's anything more to discuss on that. If everybody agrees, we'll go to public comments. I didn't, again, the team wanted it, I wanted to do that. I am not seeing any public comments. One final, oh, sorry.
There used to be an agenda item like meeting norms or cadence or what was?
Future strategies?
Yeah.
I really truncated this one. I thought this was going to be like an all-nighter. I'm pleasantly surprised to go, it's not.
One thing I wish we would consider is, and I think it's standard for some of the land use board meetings, is that materials that get presented in advance or they don't make the agenda. It would be really nice. So I heard Christine's comment pretty strong about no questions during her presentation. We didn't get a lot of time to digest that budget before.
I sent it out a week ahead of time.
I'm just, when it hits our inbox, it may not have been when you sent it. So, and the actual slide deck that you did we got that post, we didn't get that pre, right, Christine?
That's right. I sent that out myself to
Yeah.
the team.
So so sorry, Christine, I'm making a point and it's not targeted at you. It's targeted at everybody who presents. We should have time to digest what's going to be presented if the presentation is going to be meaningful and there'll be questions and answers.
No, I
Just
think that-
something to consider.
No, I think it's a reasonable thing to have. There's a lot of information that we get. It's coming from a couple of different directions and I think it's good to have it a week ahead of time. It's not unreasonable. Unfortunately, some of these things are JIT just in time. They're built and it's meeting day, which isn't good, right?
We also have to watch out for open meeting.
That's right. We cannot comment to one another within the tools. That's right.
So I will just tell you, the Board of Selectmen will be meeting the day before your meeting, so you will get any work product from that the day of your meeting. I don't know when Christine's going to have a special meeting for Board of Ed, so.
We'll probably be meeting that night. I mean, I don't
Oh.
anticipate big changes other than, where we'll have to make those changes, but we're scheduled for a regular meeting on the 23rd.
And I'm not afraid to cancel a meeting or postpone a meeting so we have time to digest. I mean, it sounds like we have a special meeting. Give us a couple of days to stew on it, but I think there's some room there. Not a lot. There's a little bit of room there.
I would say that I would want to have it, I would say I would want to have that information by Thursday, close of business, no later than.
They're
It's
meeting-
already Wednesday. There's no possible way
Wednesday.
to.
If we cancel the meeting that week, have it by that Thursday. the day.
Okay, so I'm saying if you cancel the meeting for next week, that puts us off schedule. So that's fine if you'd like to do that, but then we need to talk about when the budget hearing is and keeping in consideration when public school break is the week of the 18th. We tried to strategically stay away from that because people will be away. So just from a scheduling perspective, we built this schedule out together to make it work.
Why would,
So would it be,
why would we short ourselves with this fund?
oh, he's a funny guy. Or would the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education advance their meetings? You know, why wait? You have the guidance, you can meet tonight,
They cannot. They have to have 24 hours notice to post a meeting.
tomorrow night, or day after, whatever it is. But you get what I'm saying? There's not only us that has to shift.
Well, we have to do 48 hours. It's a hybrid and we are not going to have a meeting on Friday night. So probably I will shoot for Monday, depending on what the conflict is with the room and everything else. And yeah, to get that room that you're in.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Christine, there's EDC on Monday, so there is a conflict, just so you know.
Okay,
Okay.
so it's,
Can we move our meeting to, do we want to move our meeting up? We could move ours to Monday.
we can certainly move ours. So it's just,
Yeah.
it's not only us, right? It's three boards and hope we all work together. We should be able to get this done.
This room is also not available Monday, the 28th. There's a meeting.
My house, cocktails.
Oh,
Is that-
is there a brewery in town? I thought there was a brewery in town. We can meet there. Sorry?
Yeah, can we do
Yeah,
Zoom only?
yeah, we can.
Zoom only works really well when everybody's on Zoom, yeah.
It really does. So we'll sort that out. I'll put a schedule out. It'll be a Zoom only of some ilk. So we have our guidance. I take the action to craft those emails. The next bit after Sarah's comment is, I was gonna ask for adjournment. Or is that what you're-
You guys haven't.
Hi,
taken-
I'm sorry.
And-
I needed to ask quickly in terms of whether or not I was allowed to make public comment as a Board of Ed member, and then I raised my hand, but I was never.
Beg your pardon, I didn't see you there.
Oh, no worries. That's why I spoke up. I figured, I know it's hard to follow between the hybrid methods. So I just wanted to make sure that I spoke up because I just wanted to say that I know the amount of work and effort that's gone into the Board of Ed budget. And I just wanted to make certain that everyone's aware that it's frustrating as a parent of students in the school system and also as a Board of Education member to hear the entire focus be on numbers and not necessarily on what within the budget you think is incorrect. Because I feel like it's difficult to look at numbers and say, okay, well, we want to bring it to this level and not say, hey, we're looking at the budget. We see that there's line items where there's excess spending. I don't feel like that was the conversation tonight. And I think that it's incredibly difficult as a board member to then go look at the budget and say, even though, yes, we need to bring it to this level, but it has nothing to do with something that the Board of Finance believes is over the top in the budget that we're presenting in the first place. I feel like if we brought a budget to you that you looked at, said, we don't think that you need this much money in this spot, or we feel like you're overspending here, that would be a very different situation. But just hearing, we want to keep it at this level, it's very difficult to listen to because we are trying to absorb all kinds of costs. We're trying to absorb the same, as was said earlier, the same amount of inflation that's occurring for everybody in this moment. And it's incredibly difficult for us to go back to this budget now, look at it and figure out where are we going to cut? Where are we going to take things away from our students in this town? And where are we going to make cuts in education that is part of the hallmark of this town and what people move here for? So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that I understand that the numbers are important. I also just quickly did calculations. Maybe I'm incorrect. But if you had a house that was appraising on the town at $500,000, the cuts you were talking about to go down to the 0.2 instead of the 0.6 was going to be $17 a month. And I understand that is taxpayer relief, but I think that the small amount of $5 more per month in order to make sure that our schools are fully funded is worth it. So thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. I appreciate that. Any other? Oh, sure.
I would totally understand, where you're coming from there, about us taking a look at your budget. And it's not that we didn't listen to the presentation or look at the budget. We're very, been doing this for, I think it's like third cycle now, fourth cycle. We know that there's contractual obligations and we know there's discretionary obligations. And I don't know if you heard during this meeting, but technically we cannot go line item by line item and tell you we want to take this out. We trust that you guys know your budget very, very well. And, at the end of the day, we're relying on you guys to bring forth a budget that you think is best to educate our children. We have an obligation to say, well, the numbers we think are a little too rich that it's not going to pass. We have a budget to, last year we took some money out of the undesignated fund to close a budget gap, and there was members of that Board of Finance that wanted to use more undesignated fund. And in the end, we as a board decided we're only going to use half of it because we know that the Board of Education is going to have a tough time next year too. So if we have that much of a hole to fill, the Board of Education is not going to have a chance of getting any of the increases that they're going to need next year. So we kept it at a certain amount. We have an obligation to fill that gap. And that's apparent. And that's what we're doing here tonight. And we're asking you to go back to your budgets because you know them best, to cut out the 106. If you come back to us next week and say, we went through our budget, guys, and we can't do it, then we're going to have to figure something out and listen to you guys seriously and make another decision. But this is what we think we need to do to get this budget passed, to maintain the mill rate right now, and fill the budget gap that we have. So we're back to square one later on, and we've finally gotten rid of that gap that we've had for 2 years. So I hear where you're coming from.
I don't want to jump in and hold you to something on this, but you did say that if we come back and say there's absolutely no way that we can cut this without seriously harming education, that you will rethink this.
So that's one person's opinion. I expect the guidance that we're going to give you tonight to be adhered to. So if the world collapses and there's something more contemporary, we'll talk about it. But right now, the guidance will be Board of Education, Board of Selectmen to cut at least $106,000. So that's where the guidance we're giving tonight.
And I stand by that.
Thank you, Stanley. Thank you, Mike. Sure, him.
John Murphy, private
So
citizen.
there was no consideration whatsoever for use of surplus undesignated fund balance. Moving forward, I would ask that the Board of Finance next week look at the possibility of reducing the mill rate by 0.2, using that and using surplus to get it to a 0.2 mill decrease.
So wouldn't that, Sean, put us in this pickle next year? Yeah, so that's what we're really trying to close, and we won't this year, right? Yeah, there will be. You're a man of faith. I like that.
So before you move to adjourn, I just want to review the schedule as it stands right now. So today we are on March 16th, which the Board of Finance reviews the proposed budget. You're scheduled on the 23rd to have the Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed represent their changes. Then on the 30th, the following week, the Board of Finance is supposed to finish all review and vote to go to public hearing. We would then advertise the public hearing on Friday, April 1st. We have to have a certain number of days prior to have it publicized. I did not bring the statute, so I want to say it's at least 5 days, but I could be off. Then the budget hearing is scheduled for Monday, April 11th, and that was because public school break was the week of the 18th. Then you would meet 2 days following the public hearing to have adjustments based to the budget based on the hearing. And then the selectmen would have a special meeting on the 19th of April to call for the town meeting on May 2nd. So if you make adjustments to the budget schedule, it is going to have a domino effect on everything else. I do understand wanting things in advance, but the way we built the schedule, it is back-to-back weeks. So if you cancel the 23rd and don't meet until the 28th, then I don't know if you would be ready on the 30th for your next steps. So I want you to look at your whole picture before you make decisions to cancel meetings and reschedule.
Yeah.
We will try to meet virtually on Monday, just to let you know.
I was actually gonna just suggest the same, that we do Zoom on Monday and meet on Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah, we get
Just get it done.
if we don't meet the week of the 21st, because the boards are still reconciling, and they'll provide us, we meet on Monday and then we meet again on Wednesday, we should be able to, we should be able to. You're worried about us asking for changes again.
Go ahead, Bob.
I was gonna say, kind of what I spoke about earlier, I'm guessing there's more of a chance that you have 2 or 3 cuts equaling 106,000 than 50 cuts equaling 2,000. So there won't be as much for you to review as when you did the entire budget, reviewed line item by line item. If the Board of Selectmen as a board agree to 2 or 3 or 4 cuts that come up to 106, if we can find that money, that's going to be pretty easy to review, right? As opposed to going, I don't think this is my 5th budget. Every time we've tried to go 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, it doesn't work. So I'm guessing you know where we're going. Thank you.
Christine, was that another question or is that a?
Oh, I'm sorry, my hand's still up. Yeah, I mean, same. We're not going to have a brand new budget to propose to you. It's, going to be pretty straightforward. I
Great.
don't know where it's going to come, but we'll.
I know it's hard work. I know. Thank you for that.
I get it.
With that,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks for the great work, folks. Have a great night.